So recently, we had the Democratic debate, Bernie Sanders versus Hillary Clinton, and according to the online polls, Bernie Sanders won that debate. There was one poll that had him at 80%. There was another poll that had him at 81%. I think that was Syracuse.com and Pix11. I haven't seen any other polls, but I assume that they're probably in about the same ballpark because typically you have all the online polls more or less mirroring each other, maybe plus or minus 5 percentage points. So that's a good sign for Bernie Sanders. It's also a good sign that he's been closing the gap now for months. I mean, not just in New York, but in the national polls. There was a time when he was down over 50 percentage points. Now there are some national polls that have him up. There's some that have him up by, 2 or 3 points. So this is a guy who's basically done an insurgent campaign. He's definitely an outsider because he's raising all of his money in small contributions from regular people. And his message is absolutely resonating. Now, tomorrow we have the New York primary. That's my state. And the primary is really, really biased against Bernie Sanders in a number of ways. So we saw in, I think it was Michigan, Bernie Sanders do a historic comeback. When you looked at the Real Clear Politics average of polls, Bernie Sanders was behind, I think it was 31 percentage points. So he was so far behind, people said on Nate Silver's blog, 538, he said 99% chance that Hillary Clinton wins Michigan. Well, Bernie Sanders ended up winning. Why did he end up winning? Well, there are a few things that go into it, but when it comes to the rules and how they set up the system in Michigan, basically they had something that's called an open primary, which means that independents can vote in it, and of course, Bernie Sanders overwhelmingly gets independent votes. They also have, for example, same-day registration, which means you could show up as a first-time voter, having never registered or anything before, you register and vote on the same day. All these things help Bernie because the bigger the turnout, the more likely it is that Bernie Sanders wins. The more independents that are in there, the more likely it is that Bernie Sanders wins. In New York, we have a closed primary. Now, a closed primary means only Democrats can vote in the Democratic primary, only Republicans can vote in the Republican primary. Okay, that already hurts Bernie big time. It handicaps him big time. Because again, if he wins independents by over 80 percentage points, as he does, well, that would help him so much. But when you don't allow any independents to vote in the primary, that's what we call a closed primary, and that's more biased in favor of Hillary Clinton. It also suppresses the turnout more, which again biases it further in favor of Hillary Clinton. And then the other big problem with the New York primary is that it's not just a closed primary, as some other commentators have pointed out. It's really a super closed primary. Because get this, the last time you could register to vote in the New York primary was October. I mean, that's unbelievable. They're trying to shut this thing down completely. So, for example, I have friends who they wanted to go and vote for Bernie, and they were all excited about it, and then come to find out, by the time they actually sat down to work on it and figure out what they have to do, couldn't do it. So this is something you guys have to understand. This is a huge, huge, huge problem for Bernie, and it's going to be something that if he overcomes it, oh my God, then the Hillary campaign, their hair is going to be on fire and they're going to be losing it. Now, the good news, though, I guess you could say is, it's not like Bernie's down 30 percentage points like he was in Michigan going into Michigan. He's actually down, according to the recent polls in New York, down anywhere from like 10 percentage points to 15. So that's still not good, but I think it's better polling overall today than it was in Michigan going into Michigan, and he won Michigan. But again, the system in Michigan was more in favor of him, and the system here in New York is much more in favor of Hillary Clinton. Now, over the weekend, we learned another way in which the system is rigged against Bernie. Now, this one, I mean, it was bad enough with the closed primary and the super closed primary, but this one, my jaw was on the ground when I was reading the articles about this because it's such a brazen, sleazy attempt for the Democratic Party in New York to take it from Bernie and to try to suppress the vote as much as possible. And it's so ironic that the Democratic Party rightly lectures the Republicans in, say, Mississippi, where they try to suppress the black vote big time and minority votes big time so that Republicans can win. But here, when they see an opportunity to steal an election for a less popular Democrat who's more in favor of the Democratic establishment in Wall Street, oh, they do it with a smile on their face. So Stephen D. at Caucus 99% writes the following about what happened to the rules in New York. Yesterday, by pure happenstance, while checking to see that my county had not changed my registration information from Democrat to Independent, I discovered something that shocked me. The polls where I live will only be open from 12 noon until 9 p.m., making it difficult for many people who work swing shifts to vote. I checked to see if this was a statewide phenomenon or limited to the cheapskates on my own local board of elections. Imagine my surprise when I discovered that outside of New York City and the counties of Nassau, Suffolk, Westchester, Rockland, Orange, Putnam, and Erie, where the polls will be open at 6 in the morning, every other county in New York does not open for voting until noon. Nassau, Suffolk, Westchester, Rockland, Orange, and Putnam counties are all essentially suburbs of New York City. Erie County, which includes Buffalo, is the only outlier in the bunch. Every other county in New York State will open their polls for voting in the primary 6 hours later. If you think that doesn't matter, think again. Many poor and lower middle-class folks work swing shifts, which will make it much more difficult for them to vote in this critical election. Now, think about what they did here. So for certain counties, no, it opens at 6 o'clock in the morning. You can go vote before work or whatever, and close at 9 o'clock at night. So, you look at that, you go, okay, that's the way it should be. People have time to vote. Now, obviously, I think voting should be a national holiday and everybody gets off so you can get turnout as high as possible. That's not the case here, but you have a longer amount of time to go vote. That's great. But why did they do it in most counties in New York? Why did they just change the voting hours and make it so that it opens at noon? Well, to suppress the vote, but suppress the vote in those particular counties. Why? Why did they pick those counties? Well, all of them except one of the counties that they're letting open early, those are all much more likely to go Hillary Clinton. So I'm, for example, in Westchester now. Westchester is a relatively well-off county. It's middle class and upper middle class. Well, when you look at the demographics, when you look at the income level, and when you look at the average age of people in, say, Westchester County or Rockland County, well, they're higher in income and they're more up there in age. Again, demographics that favor Hillary Clinton. When you look at a lot of the rural counties where they did change the hours and they open at noon, a lot of them are lower class or, middle class. And those demographics are much more likely to be in favor of Bernie Sanders. So in most of the places where Bernie Sanders has a better shot at winning, they're trying to suppress the vote and limit the turnout, and they're changing the hours to do that, and they did it just before the election. This is unbelievable election rigging. It's over-the-top election rigging. And it's so brazen and obvious what they're doing, man. So when you have it so that, in New York City, and you have it so that in the suburbs just surrounding New York City and the more affluent counties, you can vote whenever you want. That means minority voters, African-American voters who are much more likely to vote for Hillary, they get the full allotted time. Higher income people, older people, they get the full time to vote. But rural whites who are much more likely, middle class and poorer, who are much more likely to go Bernie, they're suppressed. This should be a national story, the likes of which is unparalleled at the moment. I mean, this should be wall-to-wall coverage, breaking news banners. Democratic Party in New York tries to steal election for Hillary Clinton. It's obvious what they're doing, man. And remember, Cuomo, the governor of New York, is a Democratic Party establishment hack. I mean, he's part and parcel of the Democratic Party. His dad was way more progressive than he is. Mario Cuomo was way more progressive than Andrew Cuomo, who we have now. Now, again, these guys, they're not horrific. Like, they're obviously much better than any Republicans on all the issues, so there's no denying that. But they're definitely insiders. They're definitely pro-Wall Street and pro-donor. They're definitely part of this Democratic elite, and there's no question that behind the scenes there were backrooms deals that cut it in favor of Hillary Clinton. And yet again, man, they're doing everything in their power to rig it in favor of her and hurt Bernie. So if Bernie ends up losing New York, believe me, the results definitely would have been different if the primary was not a super closed primary, if the primary wasn't a closed primary, and if they didn't change the hours at the last minute to try to suppress votes that are more likely to go Bernie. What they're doing here is beyond dirty. So I'm just letting everybody know beforehand, it's going to be an even harder task than you originally thought it was for Bernie to win New York, because at least in Michigan, he had open primaries so independents could vote for him. They had same-day registration. That stuff helps him so much. Here, not only do we not have that, now they're rigging the voting times to be pro-Hillary.